Viewers, NOC, National Oil Corporation of Libya, has just issued a statement, and in this statement, the NOC regrets this decision of the LNA to continue oil blockade in Libya. NOC is clearly and openly blaming the UAE, United Arab Emirates. NOC in its statement says that it is the UAE which made Haftar to announce this continuing of the blockade of oil ports and oil wells. Well, viewers, UAE is a major player in Libya, but I don't think that UAE is the most influential player in Libya. So I'll give you my reservations about this announcement by the NOC. First, just a little background for my new viewers. Would you know that on 6th of July, American Embassy in Libya, it issued a statement, and this statement said that a sort of agreement had been reached among the participants in negotiations, and now the participants of the negotiations are backing the NOC, National Oil Corporation of Libya, to resume its work, to resume its oil operations like production of oil and export of oil. And the US Embassy in that statement said that the EU, UAE, Egypt, Turkey, USA, UN, Italy, France, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Arab League, all these countries and institutions, they were on board. After having all of them on board, this decision has been finalized that the NOC can now start its work and the oil blockade will come to an end. Now, viewers, UAE was part of these negotiations when this decision was made, firstly. Secondly, there must have been backdoor contacts between the USA and Haftar. After these backdoor contacts, this announcement was made, I believe, Russia was not part of these talks, as I informed in yesterday's video. Now, viewers, this announcement came from the American Embassy in Libya, and within 48 hours, Haftar spokesperson, LNA spokesperson Al-Mizmari, he issued a statement, and he rejected this call for the resumption of oil production. And he laid out 3 conditions which I mentioned in yesterday's video. So 48 hours ago, when this announcement was made by the American Embassy in Libya, UAE was part of the negotiations. Haftar must have been contacted as well. But after 48 hours, suddenly Haftar announces to reject this call for resumption of oil production and for lifting of oil blockade. Now NOC is blaming the UAE. UAE is behind this call by the LNA to continue oil blockade. Now, viewers, as I said earlier, UAE is a player in Libya. It backs Haftar, it backs LNA. For several years, it has been backing. It is not the most influential player in Libya. By assuming that UAE made Haftar reject this lifting of oil blockade, we are saying that UAE is the most influential player in Libya, which I don't agree with. Because if you look at recent developments of the past few months, UAE has been a player, but it has been not very prominent, and it hasn't been as powerful as Russia, I believe. Because viewers, when LNA fighters they withdrew from Tripoli, 2 weeks before the withdrawal of LNA fighters, Russian fighters of PMC Wagner they withdrew from Tripoli. After that, LNA withdrew. So it was said by the LNA that they were given this assurance by a foreign country that they should withdraw from this Tripoli, and there will be red lines. Now, who was the person, which was the country which was giving this assurance to LNA? Definitely it was Russia, viewers, because UAE did not agree with this withdrawal of LNA fighters from Tripoli. Anwar Gargash, who is the State Minister for Foreign Affairs of the UAE, he actually said in an interview after that, of this withdrawal, that Haftar decided things unilaterally and UAE was not on board. So UAE wanted Haftar forces, LNA forces, to keep fighting in Western Libya, but Russia made Haftar forces to withdraw from Tripoli. First example of the influence of Russians in Libya. Now, second incident, views. Who laid out the red lines of Sirat and Al-Jufra in Libya? UAE or Russia? Russia, viewers, because when LNA fighters, they withdrew from Tripoli to Sirat and Al-Jufra, Turkey and GNA, they tried to storm Sirat. Who responded? Who retaliated? It was Russia, viewers. Russian fighter jets, they carried out airstrikes. GNA, Turkey, they suffered heavy losses. They had to withdraw. So Russia maintained those red lines of Sirat and Al-Jufra. Then Egypt also said that these were red lines. It was basically Russia which decided these red lines, not the UAE. Then thirdly, viewers, storming of oil wells and oil ports. Who is trying to take control of oil wells in Libya? Who entered Al-Sharara, viewers? Russians or the UAE? Russians, viewers. Russian fighters of Wagner, they entered Al-Sharara, and it is under their control right now. Then who entered Asidra port to the east of Sirat? It was Russians, Russian fighters, as was said by the NOC as well. There were Russian fighters and Syrian fighters. So Russian and Syrian fighters, they entered Asidra port as well. Russia is trying to take control of oil-rich areas and oil wells, not the UAE. So I think right now, Russia is a major player in Libya, not the UAE. Yes, UAE is a player. It backs Haftar. It funds Haftar, but it does not mean that it can make Haftar do whatever it wants him to do. That is why, because I believe that since Russia was not on board, it wasn't part of the talks led by the US and the UN. That is why it did not want this oil blockade to be lifted, because this major leverage that Russia has, that LNA has over the GNA and Turkey, they do not want to lose this leverage. This is my view. I think the NOC is avoiding naming Russia deliberately, because Russia and Turkey, they are in talks. We came to know from Turkish foreign minister today that Turkey and Russia, they are in negotiations, and if these talks fail, then Turkey will launch Serhat and Al-Jufra offensives. But first, Turkey is trying the table, trying these negotiations. So it means that Russia and Turkey, they are in negotiations, and Turkey and GNA, they do not want to disrupt this process of talks. That is why I think Russia has not been named by the NOC, National Cooperation of Libya, but it does not mean that Russia is not part of this decision by the LNA to continue this blockade of oil ports and oil wells. I believe you that Russia was left out of the talks led by the UN. Russians were not happy. That is why they decided to make LNA announce the continuing of this oil blockade